The silent departure. The Council's decision. The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 3 kilometers of crystalline architecture, floating in the void between star systems. 200 species gathered in this neutral space, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some existed as clouds of sentient gas, others as beings of pure thought housed in mechanical shells, and many possessed physical bodies that defied easy description. At the center of the grand chamber stood Ambassador Sarah Mitchell, representing humanity. She was a woman in her 50s with short silver hair and eyes that had witnessed 2 decades of diplomatic service. Her simple gray suit contrasted sharply with the elaborate forms surrounding her. Behind her, holographic displays showed humanity's 40-year contribution to galactic civilization. The Zitharian Prime Speaker rose from his platform, his 6 arms gesturing in a pattern that signified formal address. His species had guided the assembly for 3,000 years, and his voice carried the weight of ancient authority. "We gathered today to address a matter of growing concern," the Prime Speaker announced. "The human delegation has served alongside us for 4 decades. However, their approach to galactic governance has become problematic." Sarah stood quietly, her face revealing nothing. She had expected this moment for months. The signs had been impossible to miss. The Dracovian representative, a massive reptilian being whose scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns, spoke next. "Humans question everything. They see problems where none exist. For 40 years they have warned us about dangers that never materialize. Their constant worry wastes our time and resources." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Singing Collective, beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies, added their voice. "Humans maintain backup systems for systems that have functioned flawlessly for millennia. They document everything obsessively. They refuse to trust the wisdom of elder species." One by one, representatives voiced their frustrations. Humans were too cautious, too detail-oriented, too insistent on what they called contingency planning. They acted as though the galaxy might collapse without their constant vigilance. They involved themselves in matters that elder species considered settled long ago. The Zitharian Prime Speaker raised his central arms. "I propose Formal Resolution 773. Humanity shall be removed from all operational positions within the Galactic Assembly. They will retain observer status but will no longer participate in maintenance, mediation, research, or peacekeeping operations. Let them manage their own small region of space and leave galactic affairs to those with proper experience." The voting began. Sarah watched as the results appeared on the central display. The Dracovians voted yes. The Singing Collective voted yes. The Ancient Morphians, the mysterious Shadow Syndicate, the powerful Kronos Empire all voted yes. Only 5 species voted against the resolution, but their votes could not overcome the majority. "The resolution passes," the Prime Speaker announced. "Ambassador Mitchell, you have 30 standard days to complete the transition and withdraw all human personnel from assembly operations." Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm and clear. "The human delegation accepts the Assembly's decision. However, we will not require 30 days. All human personnel will be withdrawn within 10 standard days. We will provide complete documentation for all ongoing projects. We will train replacement staff if desired. We take nothing that does not belong to us." A surprised silence filled the chamber. They had expected protests, negotiations, perhaps even anger. Instead, Sarah simply accepted the decision and began discussing logistics. The Morphian representative, a being whose form constantly shifted between dimensions, asked, "What about the frontier conflict mediation? Your people have managed that situation for 15 years. Complete files and current status will be transferred," Sarah replied. "The situation is currently stable. Your mediators should have no difficulty continuing the work." "And the Deep Space Navigation Network?" pressed another representative. "Human engineers have maintained that system since installation. Full technical documentation will be provided. The system is operating within normal parameters. The Assembly's engineers designed it originally. They should have no trouble with maintenance." For every concern raised, Sarah had a professional, emotionless answer. Yes, humans would withdraw from medical research stations. Yes, they would transfer all diplomatic protocols. Yes, they would close their offices and return all Assembly property. She showed no resentment, no sense of injustice. She simply accepted the decision and organized the transition. As the session concluded, Councillor Viran of the Luminar approached Sarah privately. The Luminar were beings of living light, and Varen's form pulsed with concern. Ambassador, are you certain about this rapid withdrawal? The work your people do is more valuable than the Assembly realizes. Sarah offered a small, tired smile. Counselor, we have given 40 years of service. We have tried to help, but we have been told repeatedly that our help is unwanted, that we interfere, that we worry unnecessarily. Very well, we will stop interfering. Perhaps the Assembly is right. Perhaps the galaxy functions perfectly without us. But we are tired, Counselor, Sarah said quietly. Tired of being dismissed. Tired of having our warnings ignored. Tired of working thanklessly in the background. The Assembly has made its wishes clear. We will respect them. The withdrawal begins within 48 hours. The human exodus began across 1,000 stations and 100 worlds. On Navigation Station Epsilon, Chief Engineer Marcus Chen supervised the packing of equipment. He had spent 12 years maintaining the Deep Space Navigation Network, a system that allowed ships to traverse the galaxy safely. He and his team of 30 engineers worked around the clock monitoring quantum fluctuations, adjusting signal strengths, compensating for gravitational anomalies. Make sure the Dracovian team gets all the documentation, Marcus told his assistant. Every procedure, every calibration schedule, every anomaly log. The Dracovian replacement engineer examined the thick data files with what might have been amusement. This seems excessive. The system has automated safeguards. Marcus paused, choosing his words carefully. The automated safeguards handle 95% of situations. It's the other 5% that requires attention. The documentation covers those scenarios. If the situations are so rare, they cannot be significant. As you say, Marcus replied. Everything is documented. Good luck. Similar conversations occurred throughout human-operated facilities. On Medical Research Station Omega, Dr. Jennifer Walsh handed over 20 years of xenobiology research to Assembly scientists. She tried to explain the importance of continuing certain experimental protocols, but her warnings were met with polite dismissal. In the disputed territories, Commander James Rodriguez transferred command of peacekeeping forces to Assembly military units. He attempted to brief the replacement commander on local tensions, cultural sensitivities, and informal agreements that kept fragile peace intact. These arrangements are not in the official treaties, the Assembly commander noted. No, sir. They developed organically over years of working with local populations. They're crucial for maintaining stability. We will follow official protocols. Unofficial arrangements complicate proper military procedure. Rodriguez nodded slowly. Understood. All documentation is in the transfer files. Everywhere humans departed, they left behind comprehensive records. They spent long hours training replacement staff. They explained systems, warned about potential problems, shared hard-won knowledge. And everywhere, their warnings were met with the same response. Polite acknowledgement followed by dismissal. The elder species had managed the galaxy for millions of years. They did not need human anxiety. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell gave her final address from the departing transport ship. Humanity thanks the Galactic Assembly for 40 years of cooperation. We wish you success in all future endeavors. Should you require our assistance in the future, you know how to reach us. The transport engaged its faster-than-light drive, and humanity vanished from assembly space. False confidence on the Galactic Assembly Station. Celebrations were subdued but genuine. The Zetharian Prime Speaker hosted a small gathering for senior representatives. We have freed ourselves from unnecessary complication, he announced. Humans meant well, but their constant warnings created more problems than they solved. Now we can govern with the clarity that comes from experience and wisdom. The Dracovian representative agreed enthusiastically. Assembly meetings will be more efficient. Decisions that took weeks debating human concerns will now take days. We will accomplish more with less friction. Others nodded in agreement. They felt validated in their choice. The galaxy had not collapsed when humans departed. Trade continued. Communication networks functioned. Life went on exactly as it had before humans arrived. Only Counselor Varen remained quiet, watching long-range sensors as the human fleet disappeared into their territory. Something about Ambassador Mitchell's final words troubled the Luminar. Not what she had said, but how she had said it. There had been no pleading, no hope for reconciliation, just a simple statement of fact. You know how to reach us. As though she expected they would need to. The first week after human departure passed without incident. The assembly congratulated itself on a smooth transition. Human documentation was filed away for reference. Replacement staff settled into their new roles. Everything appeared normal. The second week brought small anomalies. A ship emerged from faster-than-light travel 3,000 kilometers off course in the outer rim. Navigation Station Epsilon reported it as a minor calibration error. The Dracovian engineers adjusted the local beacon and considered the matter resolved. 2 days later, another ship experienced the same problem in a different sector. Then another. The incidents were minor, causing no damage, but they were becoming more frequent. The Dracovian chief engineer reviewed the documentation left by Marcus Chen. The files were extensive and thorough. Everything was there. The problem was understanding what it all meant. The technical language was precise, but the context, why certain procedures mattered, how different systems affected each other, that understanding came from experience the Dracovians did not yet possess. We need more time to familiarize ourselves with human procedures, the chief engineer reported to his superiors. The system is more complex than we initially understood. Take the time you need, came the response. Minor navigation errors are inconvenient but not critical. In the disputed territories, the situation deteriorated more quickly. Commander Rodriguez's replacement followed official protocols exactly. When a local leader requested an informal meeting to discuss border concerns, the assembly commander declined, stating that all discussions must follow proper diplomatic channels. The local leader, offended by what he perceived as disrespect, withdrew cooperation with assembly peacekeepers. Within days, tensions that had been dormant for years suddenly flared into open hostility. Small skirmishes broke out along disputed borders. The assembly commander called for reinforcements and prepared for military action. He did not understand that the situation required cultural sensitivity, not military strength. The humans had known this. They had spent years building relationships, learning customs, earning trust. That foundation had been the real peacekeeping force, and it had departed with Commander Rodriguez. First cracks appear by the end of the third week. Problems were multiplying across assembly space. The Deep Space Navigation Network continued experiencing anomalies. Ships were now emerging up to 10,000 kilometers off course. Merchant vessels complained about delayed schedules. Military vessels expressed concern about navigational reliability. The Dracovian engineering team worked desperately to understand the human documentation. They discovered references to something called quantum drift compensation, a process the humans had performed constantly. The documentation explained the theory, but implementing it required understanding hundreds of interconnected variables. The humans made this look easy, one engineer muttered, staring at screens full of data. How did they manage all of this? Medical Research Station Omega faced its own crisis. 3 experimental treatments that Dr. Walsh had been developing showed promising results in initial trials, then suddenly failed. The assembly scientists reviewed the research protocols and discovered that the humans had been monitoring dozens of subtle factors that affected treatment efficacy. Without that monitoring, the experiments became unstable. On the agricultural world of Verdantis, crop yields began declining mysteriously. Human agricultural specialists had been advising Verdantis farmers for 20 years, but their departure had seemed inconsequential. The local farming methods had worked for centuries. What the Verdantis farmers did not know was that human specialists had been quietly fighting an invisible battle against crop diseases, monitoring soil composition changes, adjusting irrigation systems to compensate for subtle climate shifts. The humans had done this work so carefully that no one realized it was happening. The farmers simply saw successful harvests year after year and assumed their traditional methods deserved all the credit. Now, without human oversight, long-suppressed problems began emerging. Diseases spread unchecked, soil degradation accelerated. Irrigation systems that had seemed perfectly adequate began showing inefficiencies. Councillor Varon compiled a report of all reported problems and presented it to the assembly leadership.
We are seeing a pattern.
Multiple systems that appeared stable are now experiencing difficulties. All these systems had human involvement. The Zetharian prime speaker reviewed the data. Correlation is not causation, Councillor. These are separate issues emerging coincidentally. We are experiencing an adjustment period. Once we fully adapt to operating without human oversight, these problems will resolve. With respect, Prime Speaker, I believe we are seeing the consequences of losing institutional knowledge. The humans were not interfering in these systems. They were maintaining them. The humans were here for only 40 years. These systems functioned for millions of years before humanity joined the assembly. We will remember how to manage them ourselves. But privately, even the Prime Speaker felt a growing unease. The problems were small individually, but collectively they painted a troubling picture. And the humans had warned about so many of these exact issues before departing. In the 4th week, long-range sensors detected unusual activity in human space. Massive construction projects, energy signatures that did not match any known human technology, quantum fluctuations suggesting new types of faster-than-light drives. What are they building? The Dracovian representative demanded. The intelligence analyst studying the data shook his head. Unknown. They have restricted access to their territory. We can only detect activity from the border. Whatever they are constructing, it is massive and represents a significant technological advancement. Counselor Varen studied the reports with growing concern. The humans were not simply withdrawing. They were preparing for something, building something, creating infrastructure that would allow them to operate independently of the assembly entirely. They are walking away, Varen said quietly, not just from assembly operations. From all of us. The assembly leadership did not want to acknowledge this possibility. They insisted the problems were temporary, that solutions would be found, that the galaxy would stabilize. But as the 4th week ended and the 5th began, the problems did not stabilize. They accelerated. And across the assembly, an uncomfortable question began forming in minds that had dismissed human warnings for decades. Had they made a terrible mistake? The unraveling, truth-cascading failures. 6 weeks after humanity's departure, the Galactic Assembly faced a crisis unlike anything in recorded history. What had begun as minor inconveniences had evolved into systemic failures threatening the stability of civilization itself. The Deep Space Navigation Network collapsed on a Tuesday morning. Galactic Standard Time. Ships across 3 spiral arms suddenly found themselves unable to calculate safe faster-than-light jumps. The quantum beacons that guided interstellar travel flickered and died, one after another in a cascading wave of failure. Chief Engineer Valter, the Dracovian who had replaced Marcus Chen, stood in Navigation Station Epsilon's control center, watching helplessly as his screens turned red. Every alarm in the facility screamed for attention simultaneously. "What is happening?" demanded his supervisor through the communication link. "Complete network destabilization," Valtor replied, his voice shaking. "The quantum drift has exceeded critical thresholds. The beacons are losing coherence. I need to shut down the entire network before the feedback destroys the hardware." "Shut down the network? That will strand thousands of ships. If I do not shut it down, the beacons will explode. Then we will have no network at all." Valtor initiated emergency shutdown procedures and the galaxy went dark. 10,000 ships hung in normal space, unable to jump to faster-than-light speeds. Trillions of beings found themselves cut off from the rest of civilization. Trade stopped. Communication slowed to crawling speeds limited by light itself. The arteries of galactic civilization had been severed. In the disputed territories, the peacekeeping situation deteriorated into open warfare. What had started as minor skirmishes had exploded into full-scale conflict involving 6 species and 17 colony worlds. The assembly military forces, trained for conventional warfare, found themselves completely overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. General Thrace, commanding the assembly forces, sent increasingly desperate reports to headquarters. "These conflicts are not military in nature. They are cultural, historical, deeply personal. We need mediators, not soldiers. We need people who understand these cultures, who speak their languages, who know their histories." The response came back. "Use standard peacekeeping protocols. Establish order, then negotiate." But standard protocols did not work. Every action the assembly forces took seemed to make things worse. Attempts to separate combatants were viewed as taking sides. Efforts to establish neutral zones violated sacred territories. Military checkpoints disrupted traditional trade routes that held religious significance. Commander Rodriguez and his human peacekeeping team had understood all of this. They had spent years learning, listening, building relationships. They had known which elders to consult, which mediators different groups would trust, which sacred days required special consideration. That knowledge had kept the peace for 15 years. Now that knowledge was gone, and the disputed territories burned. Medical Research Station Omega faced a different kind of catastrophe. A plague broke out on the Singing Collective's home world, a mutation of a usually harmless pathogen. The disease spread with terrifying speed, killing thousands within days. The assembly medical teams mobilized immediately, but they quickly discovered a horrifying truth. The research that Dr. Jennifer Walsh and her team had been conducting for 20 years was not academic curiosity. It had been a race against time. The humans had detected the potential for this exact mutation 7 years ago. They had been developing vaccines and treatments preventatively, knowing that when the mutation finally occurred, there would be no time to start from scratch. They had tried to explain the urgency to assembly leadership, but their warnings had been dismissed as unnecessary alarmism. Now the mutation had arrived, and the half-finished research sat in abandoned laboratories. The assembly scientists worked frantically to complete what the humans had started, but they were years behind. The disease spread to 12 worlds before they managed to slow its progress. Millions died who might have been saved. On Verdantis, the agricultural crisis reached catastrophic proportions. Crop failures spread across the planet. Famine threatened a population of 4 billion. The local government begged the assembly for emergency food supplies. But with the navigation network down, shipping the quantities needed was impossible. The Verdantis farmers finally examined the detailed records left by the human agricultural specialists. Reading those records was like discovering they had been living in a house with invisible support beams. The humans had been holding up structures the farmers never knew existed. For 20 years, the humans had been fighting a slow invasion of agricultural diseases from neighboring star systems. They had been compensating for climate changes caused by increased industrial activity. They had been adjusting farming practices to account for soil depletion that would not become obvious for decades. They had been maintaining ecological balance so carefully that everyone assumed balance was the natural state. Without that invisible maintenance, 20 years of accumulated problems manifested simultaneously. Verdantis faced the worst famine in its recorded history. The hidden work revealed counselor. Viren called an emergency session of the assembly leadership. Representatives gathered in the secure conference chamber, their forms reflecting various states of distress. "We need to discuss the scope of our situation," Viren began, projecting data across the chamber. "I have been compiling reports from across assembly space. The pattern is now undeniable." The displays showed hundreds of failing systems, each marked with a timestamp and a note. Every single failure occurred in an area where humans had been working. Every single failure manifested problems that humans had previously warned about. The navigation network, Viren continued. Human engineers performed something called quantum drift compensation. They made thousands of micro-adjustments daily, compensating for gravitational fluctuations, traffic patterns, stellar phenomena. They did this work so efficiently that we never realized it was necessary. We thought the system was naturally stable. "It was designed to be stable," protested the Dracovian representative. "My ancestors built that network." "Yes, when there were 100 beacons. Now there are 10,000. All affecting each other in ways the original designers never anticipated. The humans adapted the system to its current scale. Without their work, it collapses." Viren moved to the next display. The disputed territories. Commander Rodriguez's team was not simply stationed there. They were actively maintaining peace through thousands of small daily actions, meeting with local leaders, mediating minor disputes before they escalated, participating in cultural ceremonies, building trust. That was the real peacekeeping force. Medical research. The humans were not conducting random experiments. They were monitoring disease evolution across the galaxy, developing preventative treatments for mutations they predicted years in advance. They tried to tell us about the Singing Collective plague 7 years ago. We dismissed their concerns. Agriculture, infrastructure, trade mediation, cultural exchange programs, resource management. In every case, we see the same pattern. Humans were doing critical work so competently that we never noticed it was being done. We thought these systems maintained themselves. They did not. Humans maintained them. The Zetharian Prime Speaker's colors dimmed to somber shades. How much of our civilization's stability depended on human work? "More than I can calculate," Viren replied. We are still discovering new problems. Every day brings reports of failures in systems we never knew humans were involved with. The Morphean representative, whose form flickered with distress, asked the question everyone was thinking. What do we do? How do we fix this? We cannot, Veron said simply. Not quickly. The humans built their knowledge over 40 years. They studied our cultures, learned our systems, developed expertise we do not possess. We can eventually rebuild that knowledge, but it will take decades. In the meantime, we face system failures, conflicts, economic collapse, and crises we cannot handle. Silence filled the chamber as the representatives absorbed this reality. We need the humans back, said the singing collective's representative, harmonics thick with grief. We need their help. Desperate realization, the Galactic Assembly sent a formal communication to Earth, carefully worded to request consultation on critical systems. The response arrived within 2 days, faster than expected. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell appeared on the communication screen, her expression neutral and professional. Ambassador Mitchell speaking. We received your request for consultation services. The Zetharian Prime Speaker, who had led the vote to remove humans from assembly operations, now found himself in the uncomfortable position of asking them to return. Ambassador, we are experiencing technical difficulties with several systems. We would appreciate human expertise in resolving these issues. I see. We can provide consultation services. Our rates are 20,000 credits per hour per specialist, with a minimum commitment of 500 hours. Payment in advance. Standard contracts apply, 20,000 credits per hour. The Prime Speaker felt his translator struggle to convey his shock. Ambassador, that rate is substantial. It reflects the value of the expertise you require. These are highly skilled specialists with decades of experience in complex systems. Their knowledge has proven difficult to replace. Perhaps we could negotiate a more reasonable arrangement given our previous relationship. Sarah's expression did not change. Our previous relationship involved 40 years of uncompensated service. Human specialists provided their expertise freely, maintained critical systems voluntarily, and worked tirelessly to support galactic stability. That arrangement ended when the Assembly voted to remove us from all operational positions. We may have been hasty in that decision. You were clear in your decision. You stated that human involvement was unwanted, that we interfered unnecessarily, that elder species did not require our assistance. We accepted your evaluation and withdrew. Now we operate as an independent consulting service. If you wish to engage our services, we are available at standard rates. The Prime Speaker exchanged glances with other representatives listening to the conversation. The cost would be astronomical. The navigation network alone would require hundreds of specialists working for months. Medical research, peacekeeping, agricultural support, infrastructure maintenance, the total cost would bankrupt entire star systems. We need time to consider this proposal, the Prime Speaker said. Of course. We will await your response. However, I should mention that our specialists are increasingly committed to projects within human space. The longer you wait, the less availability we will have. Projects within human space? What are you building? Sarah smiled slightly. We are developing independent infrastructure. Navigation systems that do not rely on the assembly network, trade routes that serve human worlds directly, research facilities dedicated to human priorities, defense systems adequate for our protection. We are ensuring that humanity can thrive without depending on the assembly. You are separating yourselves from galactic civilization. We are adapting to the reality the assembly created. You made it clear that you neither wanted nor needed human participation in your civilization. We are simply respecting your wishes while ensuring our own survival and prosperity. The communication ended, and the assembly leadership sat in stunned silence. They are truly walking away, the Dracovian representative said quietly, not in anger, not as punishment. They are simply walking away. The price of pride. Over the following days, the assembly debated desperately. Some representatives argued for paying the human consultation fees regardless of cost. Others insisted on trying to solve the problems independently, refusing to admit they had made such a catastrophic mistake. Meanwhile, the crises continued escalating. The navigation network remained offline. The war in the disputed territories spread to 23 worlds. The plague killed millions. Verdantis descended into famine-driven chaos. New problems emerged daily as more hidden human maintenance work became apparent through its absence. Counselor Varen privately contacted Sarah Mitchell through secure channels. Ambassador, speaking to you not as a representative but as someone who tried to warn my people, I need to understand. How did we miss this? How did we not realize what your people were doing? Sarah's expression softened slightly. Because we were good at our jobs, Counselor. We saw problems and fixed them quietly. We anticipated crises and prevented them before they manifested. We maintained systems so smoothly that everyone assumed they maintained themselves. That is what good maintenance looks like, invisible, unremarkable. Taken for granted. We took you for granted. Yes. And when we tried to explain our work, to warn about potential problems, we were dismissed as anxious and interfering. Eventually, we stopped trying to explain. We simply did the work. Why did you not refuse to leave? Why did you not fight the vote? Because you had the right to make that choice, Sarah replied. The Assembly is a voluntary organization. If the majority did not want human participation, we had no right to force ourselves upon you. We could have argued, lobbied, politicked. Instead, we chose dignity. We left cleanly, professionally, and without burning bridges. We hoped that eventually, the galaxy would understand our value. We did not anticipate it would happen this way. Can we repair this relationship? Can humanity return to the Assembly? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Counselor, 40 years ago, humans joined the Assembly eager to contribute, excited to be part of galactic civilization. We offered our help freely because we believed in cooperation, in building something greater together. That enthusiasm was met with condescension, dismissal, and ultimately rejection. You cannot unring that bell. You cannot restore what was lost. So there is no hope? I did not say that. But the relationship cannot be what it was. If humanity returns to the Assembly, it will be as equal partners, respected for our contributions, compensated fairly for our work, and listened to when we raise concerns. Not as junior members grateful to be included, not as anxious children who need to be tolerated, as equals. Many species will resist that. Then they will continue experiencing the consequences of their pride. Counselor, the galaxy is vast. Humanity does not need the Assembly to thrive. We have our own worlds, our own resources, our own civilization. We can build our own infrastructure and chart our own course. The question is not whether humanity needs the Assembly. The question is whether the Assembly needs humanity. A changed relationship. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Galactic Assembly finally accepted reality. They could not solve the cascading crises without human expertise. Pride was expensive and the galaxy could no longer afford it. The Assembly sent a formal delegation to Earth, led by the Zetharian Prime Speaker himself. They came not to negotiate but to apologize. We failed to recognize the value of your contributions, the Prime Speaker admitted, standing before the human leadership. We mistook competence for interference, expertise for anxiety, and dedication for meddling. We were wrong. We are asking humbly for a chance to rebuild our relationship. The human response was not immediate acceptance. Weeks of negotiations followed. Humanity demanded formal recognition as a senior member of the Assembly, equal status with the eldest species, fair compensation for services, and most importantly, actual authority to implement recommendations without being overruled by species who did not understand the technical details. The Assembly agreed to all terms. They had no choice. The alternative was watching their civilization collapse. Human specialists returned to their previous positions, but everything had changed. Now, when engineers warned about quantum drift, politicians listened. When mediators explained cultural complexities, military commanders deferred to their expertise. When doctors predicted disease mutations, resources were allocated immediately. The navigation network came back online within 2 months of humanity's return. The war in the disputed territories ended through careful mediation. The plague was contained and treated. Verdantis received the agricultural support it desperately needed, but the galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Respect is not given based on age or tradition. Respect is earned through competence, dedication, and results. The elder species had assumed their ancient wisdom made them superior. They had discovered that wisdom comes not from age, but from actually doing the work. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell stood once again in the Grand Assembly Hall, but her position had changed. She no longer stood in the center as a petitioner. She stood on the raised platform reserved for senior council members, equal in status to the Zetharian Prime Speaker himself. "We return to the assembly not as we left," Sarah announced to the gathered species. "We return as partners, as equals, as recognized contributors to galactic civilization. We bring not only our expertise but a lesson the galaxy needed to learn. The most important work is often invisible. The most valuable contributions are frequently taken for granted. And the people who keep civilization functioning deserve respect, recognition, and fair compensation." Councillor Viran, watching from the Luminar delegation, felt their form pulse with relief and hope. Perhaps the galaxy had finally grown wise enough to value those who did the work, rather than those who merely took credit for stability they did not maintain. The humans had walked away quietly, and in their absence, the galaxy had learned what it truly meant to govern, to maintain, to care for the complex systems that kept civilization alive. They had learned humility, they had learned respect, and they had learned that sometimes the most powerful statement is not made through words or force, but through simple, dignified absence. The galaxy would not make this mistake again.